We're going to begin momentarily. And we're just going to pause for a moment longer as various people join the webinar, and then we will get started with today's presentation, the 2023 State of Homelessness. Hello, welcome to today's webinar, the 2023 State of Homelessness. My name is Joy Moses. I am the Vice President of Research and Evidence at the National Alliance to End Homelessness, and I will be one of the presenters for today. And I'm joined by one of my colleagues who will now introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Andrew Hall, and I'm a research analyst at the Homelessness Research Institute at the National Alliance to End Homelessness.
We thank you for joining us today. We want to start with a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, if you have questions for us as we're going through the presentation, please do share them. We ask that you put them into the Q&A section on your screen, and we will be monitoring those, and we will answer questions towards the end of the session. We also ask that people respect our code of conduct, which is basically just to be respectful of each other and of us the speakers today. So we have more language that goes along with that code of conduct. We'll drop that into the chat so that you can review it. But the bottom line is let's be nice and respectful and have a informative session. So with that, I think I'm going to start the conversation. And I do see more people are joining us, but we're just going to get started and jump in. So what is the state of homelessness? It is basically an annual report produced by the Alliance and specifically the Homelessness Research Institute. It provides an overview of the scope of homelessness in the United States during the pit count, which is on a given night in January each year. And it is a account of people experiencing homelessness across the United States in COCs, continuums of care, and communities across the United States. The source of the information is the source of the information for our report comes from HUD and the AHAR report that they publish every year and the data that goes along with that. Each section of our report covers different topics that are key to understanding the state of homelessness. And this year we added some new things to the report. Specifically, we added some new charts and data on subpopulations of homelessness. Specifically, we added a lot of new information on race and ethnicity and gender. We also put a greater focus on indicators of risk of homelessness, and we are covering trends in unsheltered homelessness in a deeper way, as well as trends on recent year increases in homelessness. We can drop the link to the report in the chat so that you could see it on your own time and look through it and peruse it. We highly encourage you to do so. We have a number of interactive charts attached to the chart, so you can attach the report so that you can make it your own unique experience. So we highlight some key facts that we thought were important that came out of the data. The first key fact is just how many people are experiencing homelessness in America, which is 582,462 during the 22 point in time count. Essentially, homelessness has increased each year since 2017, and which represents a 6% overall increase since that year. Obviously, this is a source of concern, the history being that for most years in which data collection was occurring since 2007, there had been decreases in homelessness. So this recent pattern of yearly increases is something that we are closely paying attention to. The vast majority of people experiencing homelessness are individual adults, 72%. But there are a number of people in families, obviously, who are also in these circumstances. We saw record high numbers for the number of individuals experiencing homelessness, as well as for those who are chronically homeless. With the 22 count, those were the highest numbers we've seen since data collection began in 2007. Unsheltered rates have also been trending upward, impacting most subgroups, including most race and ethnic and gender subgroups. We are also seeing that in response to the shifts in the population, that homeless services systems have been expanding the availability of temporary beds. And there has always consistently been increases in permanent beds over time as a part of our homeless services systems. One thing that has been of interest is the impact of the pandemic on homeless services and people experiencing homelessness. There was a year during the pandemic, 2021, where data collection was disrupted. But we are able to see numbers for 2020 and 2022. And when we look at those 2 years, we only see a 0.3% increase in homelessness. Again, any increase is a concern, but 0.3% is relatively small given the period in which we were in. There was an unprecedented health crisis, and that impacted the economy. We saw a lot of just change and unusual events and impacts happening rippling throughout the country. But for homelessness to pretty much remain static during that time suggests that there were some positive things going on. There were some substantial investments in human services during this period. There were multiple pieces of legislation that invested new resources into homeless services, housing, and homelessness prevention. There was also a eviction moratorium in place, and notably eviction prevention funds circulating. So with all of these mechanisms in place, even though we had some unprecedented times going on just generally, socially and economically, for homelessness to increase by only 0.3% was definitely a positive outcome. Today's discussion will focus on a couple of different areas, specifically homelessness in 2022, some trends over time, and homeless assistance in America. Then we'll walk through a segment of the report which is a particularly useful dashboard that we hope will help people understand what's going on in communities across the country. Finally, we'll get into some indicators of risk of homelessness and end with a few questions, hopefully more than a few. So we're going to start with homelessness in 2022. What's on the screen now is an example of one of the charts that we have available through it within the report, the State of Homelessness. It highlights who is experiencing homelessness in America. Some examples that are included of subpopulations that are included are chronically homeless individuals. As you can see here, there were over 120,000 people who fall into that category. They are 22% of the population of people experiencing homelessness. Also, veterans are another subgroup that we track. They are 6% of those experiencing homelessness. And unaccompanied youth is another special population, often of concern. They are 5% of people experiencing homelessness. So through this chart, you can see these special subpopulations. You can also change and look through the various years, dating back to 2007. So you can see how the bars adjust over time. We also have depicted the sheltered and unsheltered percentages for each group at the bottom of your screen. That allows you to see the degree to which people at least have temporary housing. So you can see there's great variation among subgroups, with the chronically homeless individuals having the greatest share, that's light blue, which is the greatest share that is unsheltered. And you can see that compared to all the other groups. We also track and particularly pay attention to the racial dynamics of homelessness. We do that in two ways. We highlight counts as well as per capita experiences of homelessness. So here with this chart, you can see the numeric totals attached to each group. The biggest group within homelessness is white Americans, followed by the various other race and ethnic groups. That, of course, reflects just the numerical size of the group, the numerical totals attached to that group. To understand deeper issues going on within homelessness, it's important to look at how many people are experiencing homelessness according to the population or the per capita experiences. We calculate that looking at the total number of people per 10,000. And here we see a quite different picture with Native, Hawaiian, and other Pacific Islanders being most likely to experience homelessness. Basically, 121 people out of 10,000 are in those circumstances. Other racial and ethnic groups that reflect people of color are basically our people of color. They are also more likely to experience homelessness than the overall average, and more likely than white and Asian American people who have the lowest likelihood of experiencing homelessness. We also take a look at gender within the report. Again, we look at both the total counts, but also per capita experiences. And looking at the total counts, men far outnumber women within the population. In recent years, HUD and COCs across the country have been counting additional gender minority groups, which include people who are transgender, not singularly female or male, and questioning. So we have some numbers associated with those groups as well. We like to calculate per capita, as I mentioned, and for the gender group, not only are men numerically larger, but they are also more likely to experience homelessness. 22 people out of every 10,000. It's worthy to note that we are unable to calculate per capita experiences of homelessness amongst transgender, not singularly female or male, in the questioning groups. That is simply because the census does not count those groups currently as a part of their major data sets. So maybe at some point we will be able to do that. One thing that is of interest to us, and I know to people who are in the field and just in general to communities, is how many people are living unsheltered. We wanted to take a look this year newly at each racial and ethnic group, each gender group, and isolate them and really determine what percentage of that group is living unsheltered. That is, it's helpful for us to understand who was able to take advantage of systems, take advantage of the shelter system that is available, and to a certain extent, the permanent housing that becomes available. When we look at those numbers, we can start by looking at the bottom number, and we know that 40% of people in general who are experiencing homelessness are unsheltered. But as we look at the different groups, we see that some of them, quite a lot of them, have higher percentages of members of their group living unsheltered. Particularly noticeable is the American Indian group and the Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islanders group. For both of them, 55% live unsheltered. That's much higher than the 40% for the overall population. The group that falls underneath that line is the Black or African American group, where currently we're counting only 29% of that population living unsheltered. Here's another view of this same chart that you'll find in the report, but that's focused on the gender groups. Again, we make a comparison to the overall population, where only 40% are unsheltered, and we see that people who are transgender, not singularly female or male, or gender questioning are far more likely to be unsheltered than people experiencing homelessness overall. And from this view, we see that women are much more likely to be in shelter than all the other groups. Or I should say female, people who are female are more likely. And by that, the differentiation is that we're counting both women and girls and families. One other thing we encourage you to take a look at, and that is a part of our analysis, is just trying to understand where homelessness hotspots are. Essentially the places that have the numerically largest number of people, but also the largest per capita experiences of homelessness. I can tell you that roughly you will be able to predict where these places are, because they are the states and the communities that are highly populous and that have high housing costs. There are some exceptions, but that is generally what the pattern is. And that is to be expected, because a big part of the homelessness crisis is an affordable housing crisis. And I'm going to, and so the second slide that focuses on the hotspots is particularly focused on communities, and again, highlighted at the top of the list are San Francisco, New York City, Los Angeles, Boston, Washington, D.C., Portland, Seattle. Not wholly unexpected. It's important to understand that that what these charts are telling us, it's not necessarily telling us that it isn't telling us that these locations are doing a particularly bad job with homelessness. It's pretty much reflecting the fact that across the country that we have not been able to tackle the affordable housing crisis in a satisfactory way. And so the expected places that you would expect to pop up on lists pop up. And I am going to stop there and turn the floor over to my colleague, Andrew. And we're just going to have a short transition period. And during this transition period, I'm going to remind folks that if you have a question, please do enter it into the Q&A section of the Q&A section that's listed at the bottom of your screen. And we will be reviewing those questions and answering as many of them as possible when we get to the end of the session. So Andrew, take it away.
Hello, everyone. So now we're going to be talking about homelessness trends over time. As we've mentioned earlier in this presentation, the overall homeless population of people increased slightly by 0.3% from 2020 to 2022. But some groups actually decreased over that same period. And that includes families with children, youth, and veterans. Due to factors such as vulnerability and history of military service, these groups are often targeted for interventions. For veterans experiencing homelessness, there's actually been a lot of success. The size of this population decreased by 50% from 2010 to 2020. Similar attention and resources could be extended to other groups to attain similar levels of success. Unfortunately, the 2022 point in time count reflected record highs for these subpopulations: individuals and people experiencing chronic homelessness. The population of individuals reached 121,392, which surpassed the previous record in 2007. And the count of people experiencing chronic homelessness also was higher than in previous years. We also noted in our report that over time increases in homelessness have been particularly pronounced among these groups of people: people who are transgender, who experience a 178% increase, Asian people and Asian Americans, who experienced a 36% increase, American Indians and Indigenous people who experienced a 30% increase, and Latinos who experienced a 25% increase. The number of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness decreased in most years from 2007 to 2015. However, the unsheltered population has grown every year since 2015 and increased by 35% from 2015 to 2022, which is the most current year of data that we have. The impacts haven't been equal across all groups, and here are the populations where the increase has actually been over that 35% increase. People who are transgendered, Asian and Asian Americans, Latinos, and American Indians. Substantial majorities of these homeless populations live in Western states such as California, Oregon, Washington, and Hawaii. That are diverse and are experiencing affordable housing crises. In response to the increases in the unsheltered population, systems have added more shelter beds. Shelter beds have increased by 7% since 2019. However, as this graph showing declines in the sheltered population is showing, despite more beds, fewer people are in shelter. All right, now we're going to talk about homelessness assistance, utilization, and capacity. Homelessness services systems often don't have enough resources to house people in need, or not everyone in need. But the shortage between the number of shelter beds and the size of the unsheltered population has narrowed, but is still pretty sizable. In 2022, there was a shortage of just under 188,000 year-round shelter beds for individual adults nationwide. That is enough to reach only 55% of the population. But there appears to be some surplus of beds for families and children with families with children and unaccompanied youth. In this graph, we're showing investments in temporary and permanent bed inventory nationwide from 2007 to 2022. As you can see, the total number of beds has been increasing, as has the share of permanent beds. We also note in the report that this shift in bed inventory trends suggests a prioritization of permanent housing options over temporary ones, which aligns with Housing First, which is an approach that emphasizes stabilizing people in permanent housing as quickly as possible while making services available to them. Here we're showing bed inventory trends by type in 2022. The top two forms of housing assistance are permanent supportive housing, which is 37% of all system beds, and emergency shelter, which is 32% of all system beds. The third most popular form is rapid rehousing, which has been the fastest growing form of assistance. The number of RRH beds has increased by 60% over the last 5 years. Okay, so now I just wanted to take a little time to show you our dashboard from our report. This is the link to the report. We're going to share our slides and the recording of this presentation and the link to the report on our website after the webinar. But on the very top of it, I just wanted to draw your attention to this map, which shows counts and rates of people experiencing homelessness by state, and then you can click on any one of these states to look at interactive graphs of all the different concepts and findings that we've spoken about at the national level, but here at the state or COC level. So clicking on my home state of New Jersey.
Sorry, Andrew, I'm just going to jump.
Sure.
We still see your slide presentation.
Ooh, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Here it is.
Okay. Okay, now we see the correct screen.
Okay, sorry about that. So I'll go back to where I was before. So this is our 2003 report, which is on our website, and this is the top map that shows rates and counts of people experiencing homelessness by state. And what it allows you to do is you can click on any one of these geographies, and then you can do a deeper dive exploration of all the different concepts that we have spoken about in this presentation at the national level, but at the state or COC level. So just as an example, here's New Jersey. It shows all the different communities and an overview for the counts and rates. And then what you can also do is you can either click on a COC or select one here. And then this bottom graph will populate. So if we choose Morris County, for instance, then you can see a comparison between that COC and the state. We also have a separate dashboard on the bottom where you can do a similar comparison of capacity and utilization and looking at shelter and housing assistance, also at the COC and the state level. So I just wanted to walk you through some of those things. Also, one other thing that I wanted to point out was in the top dashboard that looks at homelessness trends, by population, you can click on this icon, and then you can also look at trends for by gender and by race. Also comparing the state with the COC of your choice. Okay. So I just wanted to, so we wanted to spend the last part of our report and this presentation talking about indicators of risk. Namely, we're mentioning people who are experiencing severe housing cost burden and people who are living doubled up. And so those folks are, people who are spending more than 50% of their income in housing, and then also people who are living in shared housing due to economic reasons, including people who are couch surfing. These are folks who are not usually included in homelessness statistics, but we thought that they were still at risk and still concerning to mention for people who are at risk of experiencing literal homelessness. The nationwide poverty rate has been decreasing every year for the past 5 years, leading up to the COVID-19 pandemic. But that streak ended in 2020 when the number of people living in poverty increased by 3.3 million people. Certain groups have experienced particularly high poverty rates. In 2021, Black people had a poverty rate of 21.8%. American Indian and Alaskan Native people had a poverty rate of 21.4%. And Hispanics and Latinos had a poverty rate of 17.5%. In the graphs that we're going to show here and then the next one, we're using data from the census instead of HUD. So the most current year that we're going to have available is 2021. So here we're showing in 2021 an estimated 7.1 million households experienced severe housing cost burden, and 3.7 million people were living doubled up. Both have been trending downwards before the pandemic, but increased slightly in 2021. Looking at nationwide data doesn't tell the whole story on what's happening on the ground for people who are at risk of experiencing literal homelessness. And so this map shows that certain regions face more dire challenges. And again, as we mentioned in our report on our website, all of these graphs are interactive. So this is one of those maps where you can do a deeper dive and look at different statistics and different time periods and measures. So despite decreasing trends in people living doubled up overall, the rise in severe housing cost numbers is concerning, as are the inflation rates that have been a 40-year high in 2022, expiring eviction moratoria, and fading emergency rental assistance dollars, which pose risk to people who are at risk of experiencing literal homelessness. And then now we're going to open it up for questions.
So thank you to all of you who've been adding questions to the Q&A. I saw a few in the chat. We may be able to capture some of those, but it is much easier for us if you put them in the Q&A. So the one theme that I see in the questions are some subpopulations that are not represented. There was a question here from Tony about metrics relating to survivors fleeing domestic or intimate partner violence. And unfortunately, the point in time count, which we base this report on, does not capture data related to that group. So we were unable to include it. But there is some other reporting based on data captured by systems that does reflect that population. Often there are concerns about protecting data related to people staying in shelters that specifically serve people experiencing domestic violence. So sometimes that limits the amount of information available, but for a very good reason, which is safety. Andrew, do you want to take the question about do we have any data related to the aging population and people over 60 or 65?
That is a great question. So far, age data are just reported out in the AHAR Part 2 and not in the PIT counts. So at this time in this report, we weren't able to do an analysis by detailed age category and capture what's happening with older adults. But that is definitely a big concern for the Alliance and something that we are doing a lot more exploration and research on. So good question, and thank you for that.
We had a question from Tracy. Are you at all concerned about what will happen in 2024 when COVID monies start to expire, or when COVID monies are expiring? And Tracy notes that they are already starting to see a rise in shelter stays. So Andrew can join me in this. I think everybody at the Alliance can join us in this. Yes, we are very concerned. We had definitely increases in resources that were circulating and allowing for an expansion of services. I mentioned a couple of them at the beginning. One that I didn't mention was that FEMA was, because of the emergency, was paying for hotel rooms and that form of temporary non-congregate shelter. That has definitely ended. The increasing investments in COCs and shelters is fading. We mentioned that the eviction moratoriums have expired. These are a concerning set of circumstances, not to mention that Congress is currently considering additional cuts to human services as a part of current budget negotiations and negotiations over the debt ceiling. We are concerned. And we will continue to monitor the situation and, of course, continue to advocate on behalf of people experiencing homelessness. It's not a good thing when resources decrease and when we're facing a situation where they may decrease even further. I don't know if you had anything else to add to that, Andrew.
Nope.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's not a good thing. Have any people involved in this talk experienced homelessness? We appreciate the question. I can say that I have not experienced homelessness. I don't know if you want to say, Andrew.
Sure, I've experienced doubled up homelessness back when I was young, but not as an adult, and not ever lived in a shelter. But thank you for asking that question. That's a good question.
Yeah, and it's an important question. We find that to be important at the Alliance. We definitely openly discuss it. We are working in various ways to incorporate more voices, and not only voices of people with lived experience, but actual real contributions into our work. And you will see that in various aspects of our programming, our conferences, our actual products that we are producing. But we appreciate you calling us to the carpet for that, and we continue to welcome you to do that, and we will continue to work and improve on that. Is the data presented from the PIT counts only? Largely, yes. A lot of the housing data is reflective of the PIT count, but we couch the analysis within the context of what we know from the general population that comes from the Census Bureau, and the calculations that we do based on both data sets. So there is a mixture of both PIT data and census data in our analysis. I see a couple of repeat questions. There's another population question. Does the homeless population count include those who are incarcerated or who have been incarcerated? Do you want to jump in, Andrew?
Oh, sure. Unfortunately, it doesn't, the pit counts don't, just show those data specifically, or that population specifically. But we are concerned with inflow and all the feeder systems, including the prison system, for the rise in homelessness.
I'm sorry, I'm just sorting through some of the questions. We have a question from Sarah, who is interested in those who are at risk of becoming homeless by living paycheck to paycheck, what she calls the working homeless. She wants to know what data we have on that population, and how are we using this data to advocate for affordable housing. So Andrew spoke to this a little bit towards the end of the presentation. Do you want to mention once again a couple of the major points, and then address how that could help with this data can help with our advocacy for affordable housing?
Sure, absolutely. So that's a good question. This is using census data, and our analysis didn't specifically look at people who are working or not working, although labor force participation is definitely, and employment status are separate variables in that data set. So we could look at people who are working, but who are also doubled up. So that's an interesting dimension that we could look at in future research. But yeah, for doubled up, we did notice that overall it was decreasing since 2015, which is the earliest year that we have available for that data set. But from the most recent year to 2021, there was a small uptick for that population. And this is also something that we're very concerned with, both the population of people who are doubled up and households that are experiencing severe house cost burden. And we are using this to advocate for more affordable housing. And we're also getting a lot of qualitative data, from communities and from our listening sessions and from conferences and other outreach and what our teams are doing on the ground to get information from people about different ways and different resources that we could use to help inform that advocacy.
I see also a couple questions and some comments related to the PIT count itself and the methodology. Certainly over the years, there have been concerns about the ability of communities to count everyone experiencing homelessness in their jurisdictions. This is quite an endeavor that the federal government asks communities to undertake each year. There are never enough resources to do it, but we see many communities doing the best job possible that they can do, and armies of volunteers going out into the field and doing this work. It's very much true that it is not a perfect methodology. Not everyone is counted. That's part of the nature of an endeavor like this. It would be pretty difficult for them to count every person. But yes, it is made harder with the lack of resources, and it's made harder um, uh, given the mobility of people experiencing homelessness and locating every place where they may be. This is something that is associated with this particular count, but importantly, it is the most, it is what we have. It's pretty much what we have definitely on unsheltered homelessness on a nationwide basis. So given that we know that it has limitations, we definitely know it has limitations, but if we did not have it, we would have no sense of how many people are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. There are ongoing conversations and ongoing efforts to improve methodology. In recent years, HUD has released more guidance materials to help communities conduct the counts. That is very important, and there always needs to be continuous efforts to improve the way that the count is conducted. But it's worth pausing and acknowledging that it is an imperfect methodology, but it is what we have, and it helps us to have a better understanding of people, of the number of people who are experiencing homelessness. And it's something that we definitely need to know for advocacy purposes, funding purposes, and just generally understanding how to attack this major national challenge. There were a couple of questions as well related to people experiencing homelessness who are transgender. And in the categories of questioning and not singularly female or male, one of the questions related to when did we start data collection on those groups, but also a question about basically, are we undercounting them? Do you want to tackle this pair of questions, Andrew?
Sorry, can you repeat that question? I was in the middle of answering another question. Sorry.
It's okay. No, basically, when did we start collecting data? Yes, we as a nation, when did we as a nation start collecting data on people who are transgender, questioning, and neither identifying as male or female, and then also as a separate question, aren't we undercounting those groups?
That is a good question. And I would say, I think it was around 2015 when HUD started reporting genders outside of just male and female. But the tricky part about that has been the change in some of those categories over time. So starting with just transgender, and then having other categories such as not singularly male or female, or non-binary, which has not been in every single year since then. So we are still trying to track that as much as we can using the data that we have. And to answer your question, are those undercounted? I would say they probably are, but the PID counts are I think some of the only and the best data that we have to use to describe some of those trends. And so, we are limited to what we have, or what communities are able to provide on that.
And I think, did you address the undercounting?
Yeah.
Sorry. We're both
We're starting
multitasking.
to.
Yes, we're both multitasking, so bear with us. Are there, I guess this is a question from Jen. Oh, sorry. Do we have data or research on the number of households who are using a hotel as housing, whether occupancy occurred prior to, during, or after COVID? So this isn't a simple answer to this question. We do have homeless services systems that place people in hotels as a part of their temporary shelter. So those folks would be counted in these counts. But if a person was placed through FEMA funding for hotels, or they entered a hotel on their own, chances are they may not be counted in these numbers. If you entered a hotel on your own, the answer is no. But if you entered a hotel as a part of a FEMA program, likely not. So it's a little complicated, but some people who are on hotels and motels are counted. Laura asked, does the Alliance use HIC data to see changes in housing inventory? If so, have you noted any changes in how many housing units are scattered site versus site-based? I can tell you that Andrew did go, when he was going over the homeless assistance section, that was the source of that is the HIC. And for those we have to be careful with these acronyms. For those who are unaware of that particular acronym, it's the housing inventory count that Continuums of Care communities across the country do. So we did rely on that. We were not, in using that source, not able to assess how many of those units are scattered site or site-based. Do you have any recommended pathway to decrease unsheltered homelessness in light of decreasing federal funding? That's a big question. Go ahead and answer it. So typically we would say that the recommended pathway for addressing unsheltered homelessness is for us to be able to provide permanent housing for those who need supportive housing, which means who have a need for wraparound services. We would recommend that we have enough units of such housing to serve those people who need that. Otherwise, ideally, we would be able to provide housing assistance to everyone else who needs that, whether it's a long-term voucher or public housing or a temporary subsidy. The answers to homelessness are pretty clear. Probably everyone who is on the line today understands that, but we have historically far short of reaching the amount of resources that would actually allow us to do that. And so obviously communities have always struggled with that. When funding is decreasing, they'll continue to struggle with that. We need more funding, not only at the federal level, but at the state and local level, private foundations, wherever it could come from. And the Alliance, as a lot of you have asked this question too, the Alliance is definitely advocating for that funding. We have we are currently advocating on the Hill for, in this increasingly harsh environment, to prevent cuts, always seeking increases where we can. The advocacy is there, and we are often asking you to join us in that. And we have calls to action. For those who are able to attend our conference in July, we will be going up to the Hill in person this time, demanding what we need. So if you have opportunity to participate in those activities, we highly encourage you to, and to sign up for our email list and newsletter so you can learn even more about opportunities to do so, because we do have a lot of work to do. And the work does not stop. Let's see, let's try to get to a couple more questions. There is a lot here. I apologize if we are missing some of them, or if we don't get to you the last few minutes. Well, let me see. Sorry, we've answered some of the things, so I'm just trying to find ones that we haven't quite answered. I'll try this one from Nikki. Andrew, what were the top 1 or 2 data elements that you found to be most shocking or unexpected?
I would say about unsheltered homelessness. It makes sense given what's been happening with the ending eviction moratoria and the rise in cost of living and increases in inflation, and also just the some of the like as we were talking about before, the inflow from different systems, but still it was very alarming to me how high it had risen in this past year.
There's a question from Kate about the pandemic and its impact on counts. Yeah, this is a very real issue. The data we have from 2020 happened before all the shutdowns started to occur, because it happened in January 2020. 2021, we just didn't have any unsheltered counts. And then 2022, obviously the pandemic still going on, but counts resumed. There may have been some impact on the counts in 2022 because of the pandemic. We don't know to what extent that was a factor, but that is a real thing. Has there been an effort to count? This is from an anonymous person. Have there been efforts to count the number of people experiencing homelessness throughout the year rather than a single day? Seattle has tried doing this a few years ago. We have not been able to do that on a national level. And by a full count, when I'm thinking about the question, I'm thinking about a full count that includes people who are both sheltered and unsheltered. We have not been able to do that on a national level. We do count people through the year who are sheltered, and there is separate reporting on that, and that tells us some very significant things. There's a lot to be learned from that data. HUD publishes that through what they call the AHAR Part 2. I would suggest you take a look at that, but we have not been able to do that on a national level for both sheltered and unsheltered people. Has been noted, we struggle to have the resources to do a count of people on a single day. It would be wonderful if we could have those counts throughout the year, but we're just not there yet. As we work to do the single day counts, maybe at some point we will be able to have different other measures of the number of people experiencing homelessness and the number of people experiencing homelessness in different aspects of homelessness. I think a lot of your questions that we didn't get to as we're wrapping up had to do with the notion that we need to understand homelessness in other ways beyond the pit, and that is definitely true. But the pit is a starting point that's very, very helpful. So I'm going to actually stop there because we're at 3 o'clock. But before I do, I think, Andrew, were you about to say something?
Oh, one other thing I wanted to show everyone, and this is we'll send this in the slides, but I just wanted to share our contact information again. But yeah, we'll send our information in oops. We'll send our information when, in the email where we send the recorded webinar and the slides. But I just wanted to also share our contact information for those people who didn't get their questions asked, or for people who had further questions for us, but unfortunately we didn't have enough time to answer. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope it was a very informative discussion, and we look forward to working with you and reporting out more findings from this research throughout the year. Thanks.
Bye.